There's a power in silence that most people never understand. We live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, louder, faster, and with more intensity. Social media arguments, heated debates, people desperate for attention, for validation. But what if I told you that the strongest move you can make is to say nothing at all? You see, silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a response, a strategic, calculated and deeply powerful response that can starve the very thing that thrives on attention, the ego, especially the ego of those who seek to control you, manipulate you, or pull you into their chaos. And this is where Stoicism comes in. The Stoics believed in control over the self, over emotions, over reactions. They understood that engaging with every insult, every provocation, every little jab at your character is a waste of energy. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Think about that. You can't control what others say, but you can control whether you respond, and that's where silence becomes your weapon. Let's say someone insults you. Maybe they're trying to provoke you, push your buttons, get a reaction. The average person would fire back, defend themselves, argue, maybe even escalate the situation. But what happens if you just pause? What happens if you look them in the eye, stay calm and say nothing? It drives them crazy because they need your reaction. Their ego feeds off engagement. But when you give them silence, you're denying them fuel. You're showing them that their words don't hold power over you. And that's a lesson they won't forget. The human ego is a fragile thing. It demands attention. It wants validation. It thrives on the idea that it matters. When someone insults you or tries to drag you into a conflict, they expect resistance. They expect an emotional response. But when you give them nothing, they're left with only themselves. And that, right there, is what terrifies them. Silence forces people to reflect, to feel the weight of their own words. It creates discomfort, uncertainty, even fear, because without your reaction, they're stuck with the reality of their own actions. Don't get me wrong, silence doesn't mean weakness. It's not about avoiding confrontation. It's about choosing when to engage, and if it's even worth your energy. The Stoics mastered this. They knew that words have weight, but so does the absence of words. The moment you realize that your silence can be just as loud as any argument, you start to understand real power. Picture a battlefield, two armies. One side is screaming, charging, forward, chaotic. The other stands still, disciplined, observing. Who holds the real power? The ones who are in control. And that's exactly what silence gives you, control. Let's bring this to today's world. You're in a toxic conversation. Maybe at work, maybe with a friend, maybe even in a relationship. Someone is trying to bait you, to get a reaction, to pull you into their drama. What do? You breathe. You pause. You let them speak, but you don't respond emotionally. And then, when they expect an explosion, you give them nothing. The result, they feel lost, powerless, because they expected you to play the game. And when you don't, they lose control. Of course, there are moments when silence isn't the answer. Sometimes you need to speak up, but the key is in choosing those moments wisely. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every comment deserves a reply. You decide when your words hold value, and that's the difference between being controlled and being in control. At the end of the day, the person who remains calm, who doesn't let emotions dictate their actions, who understands the power of silence, that person holds all the power. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's strength, and most importantly, it's starving their ego. There's something about silence that unsettles people, not because it's empty, but because it's powerful. You ever notice how some people just can't handle being ignored? How they start to panic, to over-explain, to push harder for your attention the moment you stop giving it? That's not just random behavior, that's ego, starving. And when you understand this, you begin to realize just how much power you hold when you choose not to respond. Most people speak because they want something, validation, recognition, control, and when they don't get it, they feel uneasy. It's like throwing a punch and hitting nothing but air. The force of their own energy comes right back at them. Think about this in your own life. Ever had someone try to provoke you? Maybe they insulted you, spread rumors, or tested your patience just to see if they could get under your skin. And the moment you reacted, the moment you lashed out, they won. Because that's what they wanted all along. The Stoics knew this all too well. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Let that sink in. You don't win by arguing. You don't win by proving your point to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You win by refusing to play the game at all. And that is exactly why silence is your greatest weapon. Let me give you an example. Say you're at work and a co-worker constantly tries to undermine you. They throw passive-aggressive comments your way. They try to make you look bad in meetings. They do little things just to get a rise out of you. The normal response? You'd argue back, defend yourself, try to prove that you're right and they're wrong. But where does that lead? Now you're engaged. Now you're emotionally invested. Now they have control over how you feel. But what happens if instead you stay calm? You don't argue. You don't react. You just look at them, acknowledge what they said with a slight smirk or a nod, and move on. That silence, that lack of reaction, it eats at them. Because they need to feel important. They need to know they can shake you. And when you show them that they can't, that's checkmate. Psychologically, silence is one of the most effective forms of communication. Why? Because people don't just hear words, they feel the space between them. Silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to fill in the gaps, to question themselves, to second-guess what you're thinking. And that's where the power lies. Think about an argument. When two people are yelling, the tension is high, but what happens if one person just stops, just lets the other one talk, vent, explode, while they remain completely calm? It shifts the entire dynamic. Suddenly, the person who's yelling looks irrational. The energy of the fight dies, because without resistance, there's no momentum. This applies to relationships too. Romantic, friendships, even family. Ever notice how some people will push your buttons just to get attention? They'll start unnecessary fights, pick at your insecurities, just to see if you'll react. Why? Because a reaction, even a negative one, is still attention. But when you respond with silence, when you choose not to engage, it forces them to sit with their own emotions. And that's where real reflection happens. A lot of toxic behavior thrives on the back-and-forth dynamic. But when you step out of the cycle, you force the other person to face themselves. And trust me, some people can't handle that. Let's be clear. Silence doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you speak only when necessary, when your words will actually have impact. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, once said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live, and part of that learning is knowing when to talk and when to hold your tongue. There are times to speak, to stand up for yourself, to express your thoughts. But there are also times when silence is the statement. When you don't dignify nonsense with a response, when you let your actions speak louder than your words, when you refuse to feed the fire, that's real strength." So how do you actually use this in real life? How do you start applying this power of silence? First, next time someone tries to provoke you, take a breath, pause, ask yourself, Do I really need to respond? If the answer is no, then don't. Second, watch how people react to your silence. Notice how it makes them uncomfortable, how they scramble to fill the space, how they reveal more than they intended. This is where you gain the upper hand. Third, start using silence as a tool, not just as a defense. When someone asks you a tough question, pause before answering. It makes your words carry more weight. When you're in a conversation, listen more than you speak. It makes you seem more composed, more in control. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's presence, it's command, it's dominance without aggression. At the end of the day, the person who controls their emotions controls the room. The person who doesn't react owns the situation, and the person who knows the value of silence, they hold the power. So remember this. Next time someone tries to get a rise out of you, don't give them what they want. Let them talk, let them rant, let them expose themselves. And you stay still, you stay silent, you stay in control, because your silence is starving their ego.